Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm looking at the relationship between Greek states in 490 BCE. This is essentially looking at the relationship between various Greek states as reflected in the writing of Herodotus when he's writing about the Battle of Marathon. I'm going to start with the relationship between Athens and Sparta. So the Athenians asked Sparta for help as the Persians were invading. Athens knew it was one of the main targets of the Persians, and this suggests that perhaps we could see a united Greece, that we could see the Greek city-states uniting against a common enemy in the form of the Persians. So then we've got this apart from Herodotus, book 6, chapter 106.2. The Athenians ask you, the Spartans, to come to their aid and not allow the most ancient city amongst the Hellenes, the Greeks, to fall into slavery at the hands of the foreigners, the Persians. And even now, Eretria has been enslaved, and so before we get to the Battle of Marathon, Eretria has fallen to the Persians, and Hellas, Greece, has become weaker by an important city. So the Athenians are warning Sparta that essentially if the Persian Empire's invasion is allowed to go unchecked, that essentially city-state by city-state, that Greece could well fall to Persia. And there was also a number of city-states that were Medizing, that were essentially accepting the rule of the Persians, something that the Spartans and the Athenians had both refused to do, and treated those who'd come asking for them to submit very harshly. So the Athenians' hope for help was not exactly met in the way that they would have liked. As the Spartans said, they could not do this immediately, for they were unwilling to break the law. And it was the 9th day of the rising month, and said that on the 9th day they could not go to war until the moon's circle was full. This is from Herodotus, chapter 6, book 106, book 6, chapter 106. And so essentially the Spartans said, we will come and help, but we can't now because our religion forbids it. It appears to be perfectly reasonable, and Herodotus doesn't seem to see this as a horrendous kind of excuse or anything. However, it does mean the Spartans would miss the Battle of Marathon. They pick up some important information when they get to the Romans, the battle afterwards. But perhaps most significantly in terms of what we're looking at, relationship between the Greek states, this is a missed opportunity for the relationship between Sparta and Athens to be much improved, to be kind of solidified. So I would imagine that Greek history going forward would have been very different if the Spartans and the Athenians had stood together on the battlefield at Marathon, rather than the Sparta turning up too late. So in that, I think the relationship here between the Greek states is quite important. So the two states that we know did stand side by side at the Battle of Marathon are the Athenians and the Plataeans. So they are the key allies at the battle. And Herodotus gives us some insight into the relationship between the different Greek states by giving us the detail about why the Plataeans are there, helping essentially defend Athens, and why they were under the protection of Athens. And he states that the Athens had undergone many labours on their behalf, and this is how they did it. And it goes on and explains. This is Herodotus, book 6, chapter 108.1 and on to 108.2. The Plataeans were threatened by the Thebians. They had first tried to put themselves under the protection of Sparta. However, Sparta refused them, saying, we live too far away, and our help would be cold comfort to you. You could be enslaved many times over before any of us heard about it. So Sparta essentially says to the Plataeans, right, yeah, Thebes is the problem for you. Oh, we'd love to help, but sadly we're just too far away. And again, it all seems fairly reasonable. As Sparta said, so, well, yeah, we are worried about you being attacked by Thebes. Why don't you go talk to those nice Athenians? And they are your neighbours, and they're not bad men for giving help. They would be great. And again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier. On the face of it, Sparta and Athens don't seem to be enemies at this point. They seem to be getting on quite well. I mean, the Spartans are giving recommendations about the Athenians. The Spartans are saying to the Athenians, yes, we will come and help as soon as we can. But there seems to be an underlying thing here, and Herodotus kind of goes into this in a bit more detail. The Lysimedonians gave this advice not so much out of goodwill towards Plataeans as wishing to cause trouble for the Athenians with the Boeotians. Boeotia is an area of Greece controlled essentially by Thebes. So, in essence, what the Spartans are doing is they're giving the Plataeans advice that will trigger Athens fighting Sparta. No, sorry, Athens fighting Thebes. So the Spartans don't want to fight Athens. They want to kind of keep out of it, but they could kind of go, well, actually, we can cause trouble between the Thebians and the Athenians. And this clearly shows that the Greeks are divided in 490, and Spartans were not really all that friendly towards Athens at all. Thebes is definitely not friendly towards the Plataeans, and therefore we're going to see Athens being pulled into that. So we really are starting to pick up a picture of the idea of quite how splintered and how much infighting there is in Greece. So there's this big threat, external threat, the Persians, but internally the Greeks are very divided, and there's scheming and backstabbing and all that kind of stuff going on. So we then get into this story about Athens, Plataea, Thebes, and Corinth. The Plataeans took the advice and sought protection of Athens, who gave that protection to Plataeans. As predicted, this causes problems between Athens and Thebes. So when the Thebians heard this, they marched against the Plataeans, but the Athenians came to their aid. So again, we got this idea of an alliance system between different Greek states, and this is moving towards a lot of stuff we'll see more of later on. It looked like there'd be war between the two sides. However, just as they were about to join battle, the Corinthians, who Herodotus tells us just happened to be there. Again, this is one of the things that comes in Herodotus writing quite a bit. Oh, so-and-so just happened to be there. I don't know what the Corinthians were doing randomly there. Prevented there being a battle, brought about reconciliation. Both sides desired them to arbitrate. So the Corinthians arbitrate. So the idea of not only conflict, but also arbitration between Greek states. And this is a good example of that. And so it all worked out peacefully then. Well, not really. I mean, Herodotus then tells us on running this decision, and talks about how the land was divided up and all that kind of stuff. The Corinthians departed, at which point the Boeotians attacked the Athenians as they were leaving, but they were defeated in battle. Details this in Herodotus, Book 6, Chapter 108.5. Again, we are shown through Herodotus telling of why the Athenians and Plataeans are allied, just how divided Greece was. But we do have peacemakers, an example of Corinth. We have aggressors in this case, Thebes. I mean, I'm not sure if the Athenians are doing this just out of the goodness of their own heart, as we see they will end up with the Plataeans next to them on the battlefield. So they are building an alliance. Then we've got the weaker states like the Plataeans who are looking for protection. They're looking essentially for a gang or an alliance or a league to get involved with. We then see that, well, Athens went above and beyond. So it wasn't just that Athens stood up for the Plataeans when they were threatened by Thebes. That they also went on and extended the Plataean border. So the Athenians went beyond the boundaries that the Corinthians had made for Plataeans. So the Plataeans had put themselves under protections of the Athenians. Again, Herodotus, Book 6, Chapter 108.5. So again, we see this idea of expansion of some Greek states, and so there's winners and losers, and so the Plataeans, who are a weaker state, are now under the protection of Athens, which means that they can stand up to Thebes. This brings Athens and Thebes into conflict. The Spartans are stood on the sidelines kind of going, hey, that's a good bit of trouble we stirred up. The Corinthians trying to help sort it out, but again, the Athenians aren't sticking to what the Corinthians had agreed, nor had Thebes. So in doing this, Athens takes some Theban territory, gives it to Plataeans, this is really important, as I've just been suggesting. It points towards the building of alliances and leagues, and we'll see going forward the need for those leaders, the leaders of those groups, to provide for their supporters what they want. So if you want the Plataeans to stand with you in battle at Marathon, then you need to stand up against Thebes and make sure they get some more land. So we see the give and take within the Greek states. And again, them not as a single united force against this major enemy that's coming, the Persians, but actually still divided, still infighting, still trying to jockey for position and power. So another bit that Herodotus answers for us is what happens to the Eretrians. So we're told at the Battle of Marathon, essentially they're brought on ships as slaves, that they have been defeated by the Persians. Now Herodotus tells us a bit about their fate, and in doing so, it tells us also a bit about Darius, the Persian king. Before the Eretrians were taken captive, King Darius had been terribly angry with them, and this goes back to the idea that he thought them and the Athenians had been supporting a rebellion against him. But when he saw them brought before him and subject to him, he did them no harm, but settled them in the domain of his own. And so we say essentially the Eretrians get moved. So they don't get wiped out. They get defeated. They get put on boats. They get taken back to the Persian Empire, and they get resettled. There, the king, and again, Herodotus tells us there, King Darius settled the Eretrians, and they dwelt in the place until my time, keeping their ancient language. Such was the fate of the Eretrians. Now, moving peoples away from their homelands into a new area was a commonly used method by the Persian kings to make sure they maintain control and keep down opposition and rebellion. And here, Herodotus doesn't seem to be taking a fully anti-Persian stance. He's not laying it on thick about how horrendous the fate of the Eretrians was. He goes off on a sidebar telling us about this well of three kinds, and they kind of get asphalt and all kinds of exciting things out of it, and salt and oil. And so we kind of, he's not suggesting the Eretrians are in this terrible situation. They get to keep their language, for example. Now, he's not saying life was great, but he's not absolutely hammering it. And this is sometimes where we see some of the Greek and some later historians' criticism of Herodotus seems to be accused of being overly favourable towards the Persians by some. Obviously, the counter is true as well, where he's accused by writers of the Persian court of being later on as being horrendously anti-Persian. But many Greek, in particular, seem kind of go, well, actually, the Darius here comes across as quite a magnanimous and just ruler in terms of the way he treats the Eretrians. He was angry, he thought, because they'd helped the rebellion against him, but then they brought it in front of him, and he actually treats them relatively well. So here we see the fate of one of the Greek peoples who have been defeated by Darius. So I hope that's been useful and given some insight using Herodotus into the relationship between some of the Greek states in 490. This is going to be important as we go forward and we start looking at the divisions and developments and elements of unity in Greece. So at the time of this invasion of Darius in 490, we don't have a united Greece. Now, the foundations of what is laid here will be important, not only for going forward for the relationship between the states that we've mentioned, but also in the position. Marathon is very important for the position of Athens within Greece, and we'll see Athenian power rising. And then obviously we've got Xerxes' invasion coming, and the need for Greek unity in the face of that even bigger invasion is going to be really important. So some really important themes about the relationship between Greek states in a nice little bit. It gives a bit of insight into Darius's character as well. So thank you for watching. If you haven't done so already, then do subscribe. There'll be lots more on ancient history. There's also loads of stuff on far more modern history on the channel. And if you want really modern, there's a load of stuff on politics as well. So essentially, the channel's got stuff help students with 3 different A-levels. There's stuff on A-level ancient history, there's stuff on A-level history and a variety of different units, and stuff on A-level politics as well. So if you're doing any of those, please do subscribe. If you're just interested in the ancient world or history in general, again, hopefully the channel will have lots and lots for you. Thank you very much for watching.